I'm Rob. I'm going to be talking to you about compliance made effortless. As it says, an easy approach for enhancing your device security with Jamf. I'll be honest, it's a bit of a mouthful, but what we're going to go through is going to be a lot easier than trying to say that repeatedly. So it'll be nice and easy. So what we're going to go through, we'll start off by talking a little bit about the different types of compliance, what compliance means, what are some of the consequences of maybe not being compliant, for example. And then we'll go into a few different things where we can kind of help out with this. So we'll start looking about reporting on your compliance status, kind of where your gaps are if you've got any, what it currently looks like. Section 3, compliance with Jamf, will actually help you get there. Some of you may have seen in the What's New topic this morning, Jamf Compliance Editor, or may have been to the interactive lab. We're going to go into that and actually look a little bit about how we actually go and use that to create our benchmarks. And then lastly, we'll look at what remediation looks like and also what enforcement looks like. So we'll get to see what a device that's not being enforced on right now looks like, what people can kind of do to it, and then actually how we can then make sure that they can't then change it afterwards. Hopefully that sounds good. In essence, when we're looking at compliance, it kind of, in a simple way, is about adhering to laws, so either local laws or international laws. It could be industry standards, or even data and device kind of regulations around the data you're holding or transmitting. Now, that can vary a lot. So depending on the industry that you work in, that your organization is part of, there might be specific compliance that you need to adhere to. So an example being financial institutions, for example, highly regulated, a lot more controls that you're going to have to put in place there to safeguard data than, say, the likes of a local bakery, for example. Now, in terms of device and data, that could also be the types of data you're holding about people, what kind of information they've actually got held within your systems, and also where you're transmitting it and how you're transmitting it. And so really, when you're designing your compliance strategy for this, what you want to do is you want to make sure that, one, you do it in a safe way, but also in a way that your users can stay compliant and that they can adhere to your compliance strategy. And also what the knock-on effect might be to how they work, but then also other people around. So it could be how your customers then interact with you and whether or not that actually works for them as well. Because if they can't interact with you and you can't do business, it's not a great experience all around, and you're not going to benefit from that. Before we go into kind of device data and compliance specifically, compliance is a really, really broad topic. So before we go down that hole, let's have a look and see what some of the other kinds of compliance that an organization might have to adhere to. So firstly, we've got legal regulations. So that could be the likes of, say, anti-corruption laws or anti-slavery laws, etc. We talked about industry standards already. So I mentioned financial institutions. If you're taking card payments, for example, say a retail shop, you might have to adhere to PCI, so payment card industry standards as well. Security compliance. Who here is hosting anything in a cloud data center? More and more people. Right, it might be physically securing a location. So if anyone here is hosting anything in AWS like we are, for example, your data sat there in a data center, you're probably going to have security on the cages around where the servers are. You're probably going to have security guards, cameras, access locks, a whole host of different things to help secure that physical location. And then lastly, we've got what could be your own regulations that you dictate as well. So this could be an environmental impact kind of standpoint that you've got, or it could even be a vendor responsibility list. So if you think about how you do business and the people you're doing business with, you might have certain standards you want other people to adhere to as well before you'll actually do business with them. Now, what about if we don't actually adhere to any of this compliance? What are kind of the consequences of that? What might that look like, and how are we going to suffer from that, if anything? Well, firstly, if we're not taking security precautions in place, or putting them in place, I should say, and taking those mitigations on, we could actually start to get data breaches. We might lose customer data, and that's not going to be a great experience. It's not going to build any kind of trust in us. We might get sanctions, so we might start to get fines from a regulatory body, for example. And as I said, if we're losing the trust of our customers or we're losing their data, we could actually lose customers, and actually it could affect the business that we can actually take on. We might start losing jobs or not get new business. And as a result, our reputation takes a hit, right? So those are, in a nutshell, some of the big items in terms of consequences. Now, you might not be required to actually take on a compliance benchmark or a compliance standpoint. It depends, like I said, on the industry. Some people will, some people might not, but you might want to. So why should we look at doing it anyway? Even if we don't need to, there are benefits to doing it. So firstly, if we start to follow some of those guidance and start to put the mitigations in place, people see that we're taking it seriously. We're putting security in place. We're not going to lose that data. And we start to build trust with our either internal stakeholders or maybe our partners, but also our customers as well. And so that's how we can actually protect our reputation as a company. Now, a lot of compliance frameworks, and we're going to touch on a few of them very, very briefly in a little bit, but a lot of compliance frameworks have a number of different ways that you can identify risks, but also then how you can mitigate them. And so if we take those on board and we start to see that we're protecting those, we can reduce the chances of there being a security incident, which might mean there's a reduction in the loss of downtime. It might not cost us as much if something does go wrong, for example. And then ultimately, it brings more customer confidence as well. So if we link the first two of those together, if we're building the trust with our partners, our stakeholders, and our customers, and we're seen to proactively be taking mitigations and protecting the organization, hopefully we'll get either a repeat business or new business. These compliance benchmarks as well will also, in a lot of cases, might make you rethink about how you actually organize and process your data. So a lot of them will have data management processes enforce kind of change on you. And so what you'll probably find is because you're then having to work in a different way, a lot of times you see that it actually starts to streamline your workflows. And naturally, by streamlining your workflows, you're then actually getting more productivity through the organization. You get a lot more throughput through. So you start to see the benefits that way as well. And then lastly, you could use it as a competitive advantage. So some organizations, because they are taking such a security stance, and there are a lot of customers out there who will prioritize security and data protection and privacy, may actually want to come and work with you purely because you are seen as a secure and trusted vendor, and you're putting their priorities and their privacy and safety right at the forefront of your strategy as well. So there are several different compliance frameworks. We're not going to do an exhaustive list. We're not going to be here all day. Don't worry. There are a few different ones that we're going to touch on, and hopefully you've seen some of these. So we've got the General Data Protection Regulations, GDPR. I'm sure you all know what that one's about. ISO, which is the International Organization for Standardization. Tend to have, has anyone heard of ISO 27001? Anyone using it? Quite a few people, cool. So it's quite a comprehensive kind of look at information management from a compliance perspective. We've got NIS2, so the Network and Information Security 2 Directive. Basically obliges organizations to take on a cybersecurity standpoint and actually start to protect their organizations. And if they do have any kind of threats or incidents, to report it immediately to the authorities, basically. We've seen NIS2 come up quite a lot now, more and more so than before. CIS, so the Center for Internet Security, quite a common one for kind of practical approaches to how we're going to protect networks and devices. HIPAA, it's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, really all about how we look at the data, the healthcare data that's personally identifiable about a person, and then worry about how that's stored and actually transmitted as well. So, like I said, really taking user and customer privacy right at the forefront there. And the last one, NIST, quite a common one as well, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, who have something called the National Vulnerabilities Database we're going to talk about very, very briefly in a minute. And they tend to look at a lot of risk and continuous improvement for devices as well. Is anyone using any of these? Yeah? If you're in the top half, GDPR, ISO, or NIS2? Anyone? Okay, couple. What about in the bottom half? CIS, HIPAA? Yeah, a few more. Okay, interesting. Okay, so we're going to talk about baselines and benchmarks and kind of what the difference is kind of between the two, etc. Sometimes they get a little bit confused, so just to clear the air. So baselines are effectively the controls that we're going to want to apply to our devices. Say, for example, we want to make sure that all of our Macs have the firewall enabled, or AirDrop disabled, for example. Those would be controls. They would be our baselines that we're going to apply to our devices. And then what we can do, or what we should do, is to actually continually check that those are actually being applied. You know, it might be that we've applied those, we know that we've hit what we deem our compliance right now. That's great, but if we don't keep on checking and something's changed, we're no longer compliant. And so actually that whole process of actually going through and rechecking and ensuring that we are still compliant and we've achieved that score is effectively our benchmark. That assessment system is referred to as the benchmark. So I said obviously before that you might not need to actually implement one, you might not be required to by law or your industry, but you might still want to consider it. So the reason why you might still want to consider it is even if you're not looking at all of the baselines, all of the controls that a benchmark might bring you, even implementing some of them will actually help secure some of your devices. And actually, if you start doing the benchmark kind of assessment of these devices, you can make sure that there's not misconfigurations in your estate that are then falling through the cracks. And so if you are going to apply one of these, even if it's in part because you don't need to do the full one, that's where you should really get your IT, your InfoSec teams, maybe your cybersecurity teams together to work out what controls it is that you want to put in place and really think about what's absolutely necessary if you're going to do that. Because what you're going to need to find, and it was touched on earlier on today in a couple of sessions, is about striking that balance between having everything secure, but then also end user productivity and usability. Because any security team, if they really wanted to, are going to say we want to apply all of these controls, make sure everything's locked down, it's the safest way we can be. But then if you cannot use your device, it's pointless. So we need to strike the balance. As hard as it is at times, we have to compromise, have to work out the right ones. And at the same time, not every device is the same. There's no one size fits all. We're going to have different risk profiles of devices within an organization. So you might have someone in HR, for example, who's got access to everyone's personnel files. They might need to have a screensaver lock on a timeout that comes in within, say, 5 minutes, for example. But if you've got a Mac in a reception or a waiting room that plays show reels, for example, probably not going to worry about putting a 5-minute timeout on that. It's going to stop the show reels playing. So it's really about then working out, striking the balance with those teams, and then working out what the profiles are that you need for the different types of devices. So you're not overly securing ones that don't need the security and under securing the ones that do. For whatever reason, we've been through a various kind of talk with our security teams. We've decided as an organization we're going to try and achieve the CIS, the Center for Internet Security benchmark. We're going to go for level 1. There are 2 levels, by the way. Level 1, we'll touch on that as we go through as well. But that's what we're going to do. Now, how do we do that? Well, actually, firstly, before we do that, where are we now? How secure are we? Where are our gaps? What do we need to address? What it is the worst scenario in our organization right this moment? Well, we've got a few different things that can help with that. So we've got a really powerful dashboard called Vulnerability Management. So this is something that was built into Jamf Protect. Is anyone using Jamf Protect? Great. That's what I like to see. A really powerful dashboard where we actually pull the CV, so the common vulnerabilities and exposures from the National Vulnerability Database to see what exploits or what vulnerabilities there are on your Apple devices. Now, this could be because you've just not got the latest updates on your devices, you might not have updated the software on them, for example, but we can pull them all and give you a really comprehensive dashboard of the scores that are in there and the devices that are affected, but also the software that's affected as well. So if we play this through, let me take a few moments. You can see we've got a devices list tab there as well, so we can look at just the devices that are affected, or we can go straight into the vulnerabilities. We can look at the list of vulnerabilities. We can go in and actually start to filter down. So if there's a particular one that you're interested in or has been flagged to you or security want to look at, we can pop that in and see just the devices that are affected by that. We've got the risk score there. We've got a description of the actual vulnerability itself. And as I said, all the devices. So you can immediately then identify those, work out what you need to do and which devices you need to start targeting. And then what we can also do is go into the software view. And if you're not too worried about the devices themselves, but are interested in where that vulnerability might lie from a software stack perspective, you'd have seen that there as well. And then, of course, we've got software updates via Jamf Pro. So what we can do is once we've identified those risks, we know the device is in question. It might be, as I said, a particular version of the OS that we've just not updated to yet. So we've got some vulnerabilities still out there that Apple have since patched. we can push out those updates via Jamf Pro. We can use DDM, etc., and ensure they're scheduled in a timely fashion. The next one we can help you with, yet again, still in Jamf Protect, same portal, is App Insights. So this is a tool that we built in where we can effectively pull all of the applications that are on your devices into Jamf Protect. And what we can do is we can then start to look at, partly through the work the Threat Labs team does, but also public information around those apps as well, what the permissions those devices, or sorry, those applications are using on a device. So, do you know when you open up a new app and it says, hey, I want to use your location, or I need network access, I need to see your microphone. We can kind of look into all of those, but we can also at the same time look into vulnerabilities like we did a moment ago on the vulnerability dashboard. We can actually start looking at it on an application basis too. And so we can then actually use the filters down the side here and go, hey, I want to see all the apps that have been highlighted as a high risk or a medium risk, or they are using certain permissions on their devices because the security team want to look at that. And we can start to build a picture of who's using an outdated app or a risky version of a particular app if we needed to. And yet again, we can get a list back. So if play this through, what we'll do is we'll show you a little bit of the list. You can see that there might be multiple versions in there. It might be that an older version has a threat, but newer versions don't, so we can highlight the difference there. And we can go into the list, keep loading it down. You can see we've got different platforms in here, so it's not just the Apple ones. We can see the Android apps as well, and if there's any risks there. And in this case, we found an old version of Instagram that is a medium risk. So we can go in, we can see the risk score that's been assigned to it based on the vulnerability severity, but also maybe the permissions that it has, the devices that are affected by that particular vulnerability, and actually a link straight out to the vulnerability. So if you actually want to read exactly what's happening and why that's such a risk, we can do that straight away there from the portal. We can link straight out to the vulnerability database and view it all. Useful? Yeah, let's see a few nods. Okay, and now we can get back into, so this is still in Jamf Protect, but this is our macOS endpoint or macOS security portal side of it. So we've built on what was called Insights before. So if you're using Jamf Protect or have seen Jamf Protect in the past, you might have seen one of our options in the sidebar called Insights. We've kind of built on that, but expanded on it quite a bit. And we've got this new really good dashboard, which gives us a lot of summaries and a really quick, easy to view idea of where we are with our estate right now. So we can see straight away we've got a compliance baseline score. You probably saw it in the session this morning with What's New, where we kind of talked about that changing, etc., as your devices check in and their status changes. Lovely little summary just below, how many of our devices are actually checking in and supplying compliance, and also if they've not been submitting compliance data for X amount of time, you might want to get notified about that. Why aren't we getting compliance information? You might want to explore what's going on with those devices. But then also we've got the categories as well. So where I'm going to be looking at CIS level 1, I can see the categories up here and how I'm doing really quickly on each of those areas. I might be doing better on some of them than others, and I might want to start working out why I've done that. So yeah, we're just going to highlight the actual summary page here, but then we can go into our baselines. Now remember I said our baselines are the controls we're putting on our devices in order to make sure that they are secure. So we can go into each of the baselines and we can filter down. So I want to look at all the rules, all the baselines that specifically apply to CIS level 1. I don't need to see the others, but if I wanted to, I can turn on filters for level 2, for example. So I can filter and just see the ones that apply to me or to my organization. And if we need to, you can see we can enable a disable rule. So if you're an organization that doesn't need to do the whole benchmark, but is doing some of it, you can go in and disable all the ones that your organization deems isn't useful to you, and just take them off this dashboard so it's not cluttering your environment and making you look at the wrong things. And when we go into one of them, so AirDrop disabled, for example, we can see all the devices in here and whether or not they're compliant or not. So a really quick way we can do that, and you probably saw there was the little toggle in there as well. If we want to disable this rule, we don't want to start to view the compliance status of it, that's where we'd do it. Now, if someone asks you for a report out of this, we can get a load of data out of this into Seams from Jamf Protect. But if someone just wants a quick CSV report out of it, there's a little download button. Sometimes you might get a CISO or someone who just wants a quick report downloaded. We can export that really quickly and get the compliance status summaries out to them really quickly. And if we did that, this is what it looks like. I know it's a lot of text, but CSV is fast for you. That's what they're like. It's got all the rules in there that you've got selected or enabled. And like I said, how many are compliant, how many aren't. Well, we've got some work to do. So we were only 65% compliant when we looked at it. So we decided we were going to do CIS level 1, but now that we've looked at it, it's a good thing we're going to do it. We're not quite there yet. So how are we going to do this? Well, to do CIS level 1, firstly, we're going to go to their website. We're going to find the right section. So we're going to go into solutions and then find the benchmark section. There's a form you have to fill out, and then they send you an email. We can all do that, right? Yeah? It's easy enough. Well, that's not giving us anything. It's just giving us an email. Well, how is that going to help us achieve our goal? Well, it gives you a link, and when you click on that link, that lets you access the benchmarks page. Now, there are a lot of different OSs on there and a load of different benchmarks. There's actually 9 different operating systems on the page, such as Ubuntu, CentOS, Windows, before you even get to Mac OS. Can anyone guess how many benchmarks make up all of those different OSs before you get to a single Mac OS one? Shout it out, wherever. 30? No, a bit more. Close, 47. So you have to get past 47 different benchmarks just to get to the first of the Mac OS list, which is Sonoma, the latest and greatest, until Sequoia comes out. So that just gets you to the page, and then you download the PDF. There are 457 pages in the latest Sonoma guide. Who's got time here to read 457 pages? I haven't. So we've digested all that. It's not sounding quite as easy anymore, and it's taken a lot longer than we probably thought it was. But then I still haven't actually done anything yet. I've absorbed the information if I understand it, that is. And I know I need to do something now. But now I need to go off and actually start to build out any scripts that might be needed for this. I might need to go and start building out any configuration profiles to start enforcing these settings on my device. Then I need to get them into Jamf Pro. I need to deploy them to devices. And then ideally, I should test to make sure they're actually enforcing what I'm asking it to do, provided I've actually built my profiles on my scripts right, if I know how to do that. Still sounding easy? Not as much. So this is actually an example of, slightly out of date, but an example of the CIS guide for Sonoma. So it's actually really useful. It will go through and tell you, in this case, firewall being enabled. They recommend it's automatically enabled. You'll see kind of it's level 1, so level 1 being kind of practical security guards in place that quite clearly have a benefit to us. If you start to see level 2 ones, they're definitely a bit more restrictive and sometimes affect the performance of a device or what someone might be able to do on that device. But you can go through and you can see exactly what it's going to be doing and why you'd maybe want to do that, the rationale behind it. But then they also give you the information about how you can audit it. So this is, without using the likes of Jamf Protect, you can go and monitor it 2 different ways. You can either go onto everyone's system. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go around every single device in the company and start going through system settings and checking the file was enabled. Or how you can maybe do it via a script. And then actually, in terms of the guide, they do actually tell you how you can start to enforce this. So go and either go around everyone's devices and turn it on. It's not going to stay on, not necessarily. Or how you might be able to do it via a script or even a profile. There's some information at the bottom there about how to do it via a profile as well. So we can then go and start to do all this. But it's going to take time. We need to understand all of the different areas that it's been asking us to do. Which ones are level 1? We'll go through and sort out the level 1s versus the level 2s, which ones we're going to do. And it's just not easy, right? It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of knowledge, some skills we may or may not have within the organization. And so that's why we talk about Jamf Compliance Editor. That's why we were talking about earlier on, and we've done some labs earlier on today. So some of you may have already had hands-on with Compliance Editor. Has anyone done that lab today? Okay, good. Useful? Good session? Yeah? I see thumbs up. I'll take that. So yeah, what is Compliance Editor if you didn't know already? It's an add-on for Jamf Pro. A free add-on, I should probably say. It doesn't cost you anything. It's a free add-on. You can go and get it, and we can use it to automatically generate those baselines that we want to for the different compliance frameworks. Not just CIS, there are other ones in there you'll see in a few minutes. There are other ones apart from the one I'm looking to deploy today. And we can do what we call one-click guidance. So you'll see where it actually starts to do all that just with a few clicks. We get to the one-click bit and it generates it for you after you've set it all up, basically. And it's our add-on, as it says, integrate into Jamf Pro really quickly. So we can straightforward send everything we've generated off into Jamf Pro. We're ready for deployment. So we're not having to then one by one upload all of the different scripts to profiles, things like that. So making it super, super effortless. So this is what it looks like. If you've not seen it already, it's a really straightforward interface. Landing page, we'll start off just with what platform are we going to start doing our compliance on? We've been talking about macOS, but you can do iOS or mobile devices as well. So it's not just about macOS in here. You can do the mobile devices as well, but we'll stick on macOS for now. That's what we've been talking about. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new project. If you have already created a project, you can go in and open up an existing one and then carry on working. You don't have to start from scratch every time. You'll get a project folder. So if we go through and start to actually play this through and we say create a new project, the first thing it's going to ask us to do is, which OS are you trying to get your compliance on? The OSs are different. There might be different ways of working on those operating systems. And obviously, as new functionality comes out, and so the CIS benchmark is different. That's why there was 47 different benchmarks in the 9 OSs before Mac OS, because they're all a little bit different. So we're going to still stick with Sonoma. Going to go through that. And then we're going to be prompted to actually create our project folder. So this is where all of our files, all of our configs that we're going to start to generate, all of those baseline files that we need will go in a minute. If this will play through. There we go. And then once we've done that, what benchmark is it we're trying to achieve? We've been talking about CIS level 1. That's what we're going to do. But you'll see in the list in a second, there are actually a lot more. So there are a number of NIST ones, so National Institute for Standards and Technology, USCMMCs. So there are a load in there. It doesn't just have to be CIS. It depends on where you are, how you're regulated, what works for your organization, or what you need to do. But we've selected CIS. And once you get there, you get all of the rules that apply to that benchmark shown for you. So this is literally every single thing that was in that 457-page document generated for me and displayed on the screen. I can then go through the categories down the side and actually start to work out which ones I want to look at or not. But like I said, we might not be doing the full benchmark. So what we can do is we can go through and start to look at that list of rules, work out which ones we've decided we want to do with the security teams, and actually we can go and check or uncheck the rules that we want. So it might be that we don't need to enforce AirPlay being disabled, for example, or the firewall. We do in this case, but you can turn them off. If it doesn't apply to you, just go and uncheck it. It won't be included in our guidance afterwards if we've unchecked it. And actually, in some cases with optional rules, or there are optional rules, such as the screensaver timeout we talked about before. So you can go in there, and there is a little section that's called Organization Defined Value. You'll find it in here. So once we go and select the rule, so screensaver timeout, you can see there's a value in there, Organization Defined Value, 1200. So we can actually go and start to amend these and put what's right for us. It does warn you, if you change that, you're not necessarily compliant or going to be compliant with CIS benchmark if you're changing those things. But in this case, we're putting something actually more restrictive. We're not making it more lax. But you've got that flexibility in there as well. And then actually, now that we've decided on the rules, we've either unchecked the ones we don't need, or we've changed the values of the ones that we want to make more restrictive, etc., whatever works for us, we can then create our guidance. So right at the bottom, we've got a Create Guidance button. This is what I said, one click to actually generate it all at the end. So all of those profiles, those scripts, are going to start getting created now, and they're going to go into our project folder. So that folder we created right at the start when we created the project, it's going to be in here. Nice and easy. Here we go. We've got a whole load of different things in here now. So we've got our profiles, we've got our scripts, we've got extension attributes we can use within Jamf Pro as well, and also a couple other files we're going to talk about now as well. So these are the two files which are really, really useful. So there's a CSV as well. So all of the rules, a little bit like when we were looking at our reporting and generate the CSV from Jamf Protect to view what our status is now. This is a CSV of all the ones that we've generated and we're going to be applying to our devices. And actually, there's also a PDF as well, which I really, really like. So this PDF, a bit like the CIS guidance itself, where it shows you all of the rules that you should apply to your organization. This is actually the rules that you've selected and are going to apply to your organization. So all those ones we checked or didn't check, they're all going to be in here. And if you change the value, so the ODV, the organization defined value, that value is actually written in here as well. So it's all exactly what you selected. So you don't have to go and write all this out. I know some people have actually sat down and written out all of these different rules for people before. So they've got an audit going on or a pen test that's going to happen and they need to share that information. And they've typed out literally everything that they're doing on their devices. It's done for you. You don't have to. Save so much time. OK, and now that we've got it created, we said we integrate into Jamf Pro really easily. So that's where we've got our lovely Jamf Pro upload button in here. So we can click on there, pop in our tenant name, so our URL for our Jamf instance, give it our credentials, and then choose what we're going to upload. So by default, we've got everything selected. So you can see there's a lot of profiles that have been generated there that we've selected automatically. And in a few seconds, it's in Jamf Pro. So much quicker and easier. So we're using the APIs from Jamf Pro to actually send all that information across to make it really, really smooth for everyone. Now that they're actually been uploaded, we can go into Jamf Pro and you'll find them. If it's configuration profiles, it's going to be in configuration profiles. If it's scripts, it's in scripts. Just ready, sat there waiting for you to actually scope out to whatever devices are relevant for the rules that you've selected. And so you don't have to create one set of rules for everything. We talked about it before, different risk profiles for different devices. You could have a project file, which is for those showroom Macs that I was talking about, versus a profile for, say, your HR devices if you needed to show the difference in the different rules in there. But you can see we've got our profile here and all the contents that we need into it from the CIS benchmark. Easy? Yeah, a lot easier. I've probably still only got through the first 10 pages of the CIS benchmark at this point. But instead, I've got everything in Jamf Pro. Cool, so we've got all that there. It's ready to go. What does the device actually look like today, though? So if we were to actually look at one of our devices that we've not enforced anything on, we've talked about firewall, we've talked about AirDrop, we'll use those as examples still. If we were to look at a standard user on a device, what can they actually do if we didn't actually start to enforce this and didn't start to fill the gaps that we found earlier on, for example? Well, if it's firewall, you can see they're prompted for admin rights. So they go in, they don't have admin rights, they're not going to do it. Now, slightly different when it comes to AirDrop, though. We're not trying to change network rules. If we go in and try and change AirDrop, we can change it from no one to everyone. We're not prompted for any admin credentials at all. Now, on the flip side of that, if we were to do the admin thing, we talked a little bit earlier on in what's new about privilege elevation, for example, within Jamf Connect. Absolutely fine to do if your organization wants to do that. Obviously, bear in mind, if you're giving people admin rights, they can get around certain controls on your devices. You might have manually gone and enabled the firewall on someone's device, but now when they go in, they can go and turn that off. So now we're not compliant, or we wouldn't be compliant. And we could go back into Jamf Protect. We could start to look at our compliance status and look at our summary. We're worse off. What were we, 65 before? 65%? We're now worse off than we were before. And we can start to look at what those baseline rules are. We can see AirDrop says there was a number that weren't compliant. If we look at if the file was enabled, there's a few in here that are saying it's not compliant. So here's our map of care that we've just been modifying. It's no longer compliant because we've not enforced anything yet. We haven't pushed out those profiles. So let's go and do it now. Let's make sure it's enforced, and we can test it. We said earlier on, once we've deployed it, we should test it, make sure it works right. Let's do it now. So on the left-hand screen, we're going to have our admin pushing out the profile to devices via Jamf Pro. How you do that, up to you, whether or not it's to all computers, for example. In this case, we're going to use a smart group. We've got loads and loads of inventory information within Jamf Pro around a lot of the security controls on a device. So we can have a smart group that just says, hey, if your firewall's disabled, for example, or, I don't know, AirDrop isn't running, then you fall into this group, and so you will get this profile on it. Or we could just push it out to our entire estate. It depends on our situation, right? So we'll push that out. There we go. Now, if we go back to our end user's device on the right and start to look, we go into network, straight away it's grayed out. So we can't even try and toggle it like we did before. And it does say it's managed by a profile now. And if we try and do the admin thing again, whether or not we have the ability to do that or not, so if we elevate to being an admin, we still cannot go and change it. Great, my users can't play around anymore. I know that we're going to have the firewall enabled the entire time, even if they're an admin. So I know that I can safely give them admin rights, but still keep the devices compliant. And AirDrop is now set to no one, and it's grayed out. They can't make that change again, even though they didn't even need admin rights to do that before. So we can go back in. We can see now firewall's enabled, and we're compliant on those devices again, so our score will go back up. So all we need to do then is go around the rest of our profiles that were created and start to scope them out to the right devices or groups, departments that we've decided that they're for, and then go back and just check our compliance status and keep making sure that we are compliant and we're not falling through the cracks. So what's actually happening here? So kind of behind the scenes, what's happening on the devices? Well, we've got two different binaries that are running on the device at this point in time. So we've got the Jamf Pro binary, which is feeding our inventory information through into Jamf Pro, and then obviously in turn updating its smart groups. But because we're also using Jamf Protect at this point in time, we're actually getting our baseline information via the Jamf Protect binary. So they're both sending across to the relevant portal. So we've got, like I said, inventory information into Jamf Pro, and we've got our baseline information going into our macOS security portal. And then they're linked together as well. So we can start to pull all that information together. Jamf Compliance Editor, there is our add-on into Jamf Pro, pushing those profiles through that we generated. At the end of the day, what do we get? Compliant devices, happy days. And so, in effect, what we've been kind of covering and looking at, and kind of a workflow that kind of continues for this, is we started off by reporting on our devices, working out where our gaps were, now that we'd established which benchmark we were going to do. We've then gone through actually deploying and sending those profiles across. And actually, we're making sure that we then go back and monitor those devices. Are they still compliant or not? If they're not, remediate them, ideally automatically if we can. And we can definitely do that within Jamf Pro. But there's one more thing that we should probably do, and do kind of at a regular kind of cadence, and that's actually review what our compliance status and our benchmarks look like. So regulations change. If you're regulated by a particular industry, that's probably going to change. The OS versions change. We said that already. So there's new functionality you may or may not need to restrict or change the rulings on, etc. And the benchmarks change. The compliance frameworks, they differ, and they will do from time to time. So you might need to go back and actually see if things have changed, and then go back through and actually make the changes, deploy them, and then just go back into this little cycle here of monitor and remediate if you really need to. And just make sure that we still have our compliant devices so we can get those benefits we talked about before, and hopefully not get the downsides, the consequences like the sanctions and things like that. Nobody likes a fine. And that's it, to be honest with you. That's how we can make it effortless for you, make it a lot quicker and more streamlined. And if you want to download Jamf Compliance Editor, scan the little QR code. I say little, it's a lot bigger than me. And that will take you to a page on establishing compliance baselines, and we've got the user guide and the actual downloader from there. Hopefully that was useful.
Rob, Lee, everybody. Wow. Cracking job, cracking job. Very comprehensive and beautifully timed, may I say. Well done.
Well, thank you.
A couple of questions before we hit the 4:45.
I'll try.
Slot. Daniel, thank you. First up, are there any plans to expand Jamf Protect's ready-made baselines for tracking outside of Sys 1 and 2, similar to what is made available in JCE, Compliance Editor? I think you may have covered a little bit of that.
Great question. I'll be honest, I don't know if there's anything I can share. I know that it is something that people have asked for before. We do obviously have feature requests online, and obviously the more people who vote for them, the quicker we'll probably get to doing stuff like that. I don't think there's anything that I can share around additional baselines, unfortunately. No, I was looking for someone else at the back of the room, but he's not here that I was going to ask. Unfortunately, I don't think there's anything I can share there, but it's a great shout. If you want it, I'd encourage you to go onto the feature request page on Jamf Nation or via your Jamf account and pop it in there. If it's already there, upvote it. The more people who vote for something, the more likely you're going to get it, right?
Good call, thank you. We have a question from the audience. I can take one from the app. If not, thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mark.
Hi there. Is there any lags in the system that we're not aware of?
Any
lags on deployment?
Well, no. I mean, at this point, it's configuration profiles. I mean, there are also some scripts. So scripts obviously take a little bit longer to go out. They're not the same as a profile that's going to go out via APNS, for example. So it would be whenever you next deploy that script. So it could be by Jamf Pro, your next check-in. Depends on how you configure it. But that's the only one that you're really going to get, because you're the one who's determining how quickly that actually gets deployed and how you're actually doing it. So that would be the only thing.
Is that after recon?
No, so not for a check-in. Mm-hmm. So a check-in, for those of you who may or may not know, via Jamf Pro, so the Jamf binary will do a check-in at a set period of time. Now, by default, it's every 15 minutes, with maybe a 5-minute skew, so not all your devices check in at the same time. But you can adjust that time yourself within Jamf Pro as low down as 5 minutes. And it's basically your device just then turning around to Jamf Pro going, hey, have you got anything for me? Is there any policies I need to run? So if you've not deployed out your baselines yet, and you're doing that, and there's a script involved in it, you could set it to maybe be at your recurring check-in, and you know that's going to be, depending on your organization, it could be 50 minutes, it could be 5 minutes. and you know that that script then would have run on the device, and you've started to put your baselines and your compliance in place. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, that did. Also, I've got one more.
Yeah.
So with Jamf Pro, it's all included. So this Jamf Protection and Jamf Pro.
So Jamf Protect and Jamf Pro are two separate products that we've got. So Jamf Protect being our macOS endpoint protection, but then also our network protections against phishing, malware traffic, but then also mobile threat defense, etc. So our mobile device endpoint protection. Jamf Pro then being our management solution, and then Compliance Editor, as we saw, was a separate add-on, free add-on that can feed into Jamf Pro.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. We'll take a question from Alex. Thanks, Alex. Does it combine the configuration profiles, for example, the firewall, or will you get one per selected rule?
So it groups it based on the different areas and the different identifiers. So you may have seen if let me try and go back and I'll try and show you really quickly. When it goes into the different profiles we've got created, you see these different names at the end. They're different identifiers within the OS that we're actually looking at. So a lot of the settings may fall together in a particular area. So we don't do an individual one for firewall, then maybe a different one for AirDrop. If they fall within the same identifier in the OS, we group them together. Saves on the number of profiles, saves on the upload, saves on scoping out, etc. But that's why we've kind of had, 10, 12 different profiles, but not 50 different profiles, for example.
One last question, I think, before we depart for 5. It's from Gary. Hi, Rob. Please, can you explain the difference between Jamf Protect and Security Cloud? Is there a difference? Are both included in the Jamf business plan? Thanks.
So, I mentioned it a moment ago, Jamf Protect, there is several areas kind of fall within Jamf Protect. So we've got, like I said, macOS endpoint protection, and we looked at the macOS security portal. So that was the darker screen where we looked at our baseline summaries and our compliance summaries. And then Jamf Security Cloud, where we saw the vulnerability management and the app insights, is a different portal where normally our network protections live. They're both the same product. They're just two different areas, because what you tend to find is some security teams will look at the endpoint side, but then because a lot of the other bits are in Security Cloud are network protections, it may fall under a different team. It may not. It might still be the same security team. So they're separate portals, but they're one product. They're both Jamf Protect, and hopefully that's answered that question.
Beautifully. Thank you. That brings us to the end. Rob, thank you so much.
Beer o'clock.
Lovely.